You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hi, we're Enterprise Splaining, the podcast where we explain Star Trek Enterprise to each other and to you. I'm Bill, and these are my co-hosts, Jamie.
Hi.
And Maria.
Hello.
And joining us today is a very special guest, Erica Laurie, who is going to contribute some key information that we're going to need for this recap. Erica, introduce yourself, and what is your relationship to Star Trek and Enterprise in particular?
Jolan True. When I was about 10 years old, I had a dog named Worf because my mom was a Star Trek fan, and we always had it on in the house. So I remember thinking that Worf was such a cool name for a dog. And to this day, I always crack up when Luoxana Troy calls Worf Mr. Woof. That's sort of a special thing for me. About 5 years ago, I decided I wanted to really get back into Trek again after not having watched a lot of it since my childhood. I actually took Jonathan Frakes' advice and started with the original series.
Terrible advice.
I actually thought it was great. I wanted to get all of the jokes. I wanted to know all of the references. And so I watched it in the order of release all the way from the original series and continued all the way through the new series. And then after watching everything, I decided I wanted to watch it all again. So I've just been rewatching over the past 5 years.
Well, I feel like 5 years ago is a good time to start doing that. There's something going on at that time that made that easier.
Yeah, it seems to be a running thread, as a lot of people are watching a lot of television 5 years ago.
Yeah, and Jamie and I have known each other for a long time. So when Enterprise Splaining first came out, I was super excited about it, and I've been listening since the very first episode, and I am Enterprise Splaining's #1 fan.
Yeah, I would say that. Also, for the listeners, I asked Erica to help me match guests to episodes in the second season, and then she went and rewatched the entire second season in order to help us out. So
masochist.
This season, if you think we have good guests matching to episodes, it is really because of Erica.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you, Erica.
Appreciate it.
Glad to help.
And Erica, what is your opinion of Enterprise in general?
I hold a special place in my heart for all Star Trek, even bad episodes and even bad series. I mean, there are a few episodes throughout Star Trek that I refuse to watch anymore, but in general, all Star Trek is good Star Trek to me. It all has its own special flavor.
Enterprise certainly has a special flavor to it.
Boy, does it.
Indeed.
Today, our mission is a second contact. On last week's main episode, I watched Minefield and described it to my co-hosts, but now they've watched it and are back with their thoughts, so make sure you listen to last week's episode before you listen to this one. Last week, I told my co-hosts about the episode Minefield, and they finally had a chance to watch it, so what are your thoughts on that episode?
So I'm doing the thing that I always do, which is just looking at my notes, and I have not prepped enough for this second contact. So I'm just going to read some of my notes out like I usually do, but there are a few things. The very first note I have is Malcolm is so sweaty, and then the very last note I have is just the word why. Like, I have no idea what that's about.
Okay. Obviously, this made a big impression on you.
Clearly. I was really hoping for the interaction between Archer and Malcolm to like tell us a little bit about Malcolm or grow their relationship in some way, and that did not happen. And Archer just looked so disappointed when he lost sport as a topic, because Malcolm was just like, I don't really pay attention to any sports. Great.
Yeah, the fact that he tried to bring it up again, and Malcolm's like, no, I'm still not, I was not into sports this morning, and I'm still not into sports.
Malcolm is the Etch-a-Sketch character. Like, every episode, they just shake him, and anything that had accumulated over time is now gone, and he's just gone back to being a blank slate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the big thing that I had was actually something that Stephen pointed out, which is, why did the mine attach itself to the Enterprise and not blow up?
I don't know.
Just explode.
It's a great question.
And the mine doesn't think it's on, like, and why did it have those things that, like, came out of it and went into Malcolm's, like, why? Why would it do that?
I had that same question.
And I was quite annoyed that we hadn't thought of that. But yeah, it makes no sense. Like, it was just such a random device. That and the fact that, how does Malcolm know how to take this thing apart? Like, none of that makes any sense, that all bombs are exactly the same.
That didn't even bother me. I just wanted them to be able to... Yeah, that's not something I don't even think about. You know what really struck me as I was going back and listening to episodes? Carbon Creek, the Vulcans speak perfect English.
That's a really good point.
Thank you. Yeah. And didn't occur to me until I'd, like, 3 weeks later.
Well, wait.
They might have had universal translators.
But the humans don't.
Okay, but when Archer was on that planet that had never had a contact...
Right.
He had a universal translator, and it made him somehow talk in a way that they could understand him and sounded real, not like it was being translated. So it's Star Trek magic.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
That's all it is.
Wouldn't their lips be moving differently if they had a universal translator?
Yeah, we've had so many difficult conversations about this.
It's Star Trek magic because it's not about that. It's about the show. So it's fine.
Yeah. And then they referenced the imaging chamber, and I wondered if that was a Quantum Leap reference.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that didn't even pick up on that one.
Yeah. Anyway, what you got, Jamie?
All right. So unlike Maria, I did prep. I prepped so much that I created 5 separate categories of things I wanted to talk about.
Oh my God.
Because I had a lot of thoughts about this episode, despite the fact that very little happened in it. I have a lot of thoughts. The first is that breakfast was so awkward. I understand that this is a spaceship and spaceships are not regular workspaces because you live there, but not everybody wants to be friends with their boss, even when you're living on a spaceship. I'm sorry. Like, I just think that Archer pushing Malcolm to be friends with him, they don't need to be friends. We've seen them work together. We saw them work together in this episode very well. They clearly have a very good working relationship. I really hate like forced social situations at work in general. But that's what this felt like. It just feels like Archer doesn't want anyone to not like him or not be his friend. Sure. And so he's pushing Malcolm into a situation that clearly makes him really uncomfortable. And it's not like Malcolm can turn down the breakfast because this is his boss. It's like when Hoshi invited him for a meal, he could turn that down. But when his boss does it, he can't. He has to go. He clearly doesn't like it. They don't have anything in common. It really bothered me.
In fairness, Malcolm is a department head, so he should be, be expected to interact with his captain. I mean, to your point,
in work situations,
Malcolm is being very cozy about it, but
yeah, it didn't bother me. I don't really have an issue with a boss trying to get to know the people who he works for a little better. I think that's a fairly normal thing. Your boss asks you to go to lunch or something just to kind of talk outside of the work situation and learn who you are. I agree that it's awkward and difficult, but it didn't really bother me. It felt like something that Archer would do just because he wants his people to like him, but also just kind of for kind of crew cohesiveness, wanted to kind of get to know everybody. Also, those eggs Benedict looked amazing.
They did look beautiful.
I wanted them immediately.
So my second big topic was Malcolm's personality shift. I mean, Bill, you mentioned this a little bit earlier. In terms of Malcolm being a rule follower, that is the opposite of every single thing that we have seen about Malcolm up to this point. I made a list of times that we saw him doing the opposite of that. In Silent Enemy, he wanted to bypass all the safety rules to create a super weapon, and Trip had to basically reprimand him and force him to do things by the book. In Voxola, he wanted to torture the Jizz Monster arm, and Phlox had to have a confrontation with him to prevent it. Just the constant sexual harassment of T'Pol, which is very, I assume, is against Starfleet rules. And then even just in this episode and all the time, we always see him talking back to authority figures. So his whole, like, I'm just like a stickler for the rules, and I'm just following all the rules, doing everything by the book, is the opposite of every single thing that we've ever seen about Malcolm up till this point, and even in other parts of this episode. And yeah, I think, like you said, Bill, calling him like an Etch-a-Sketch character, like, it just seems like the writers in season 2 are deciding to like do a reset on his character or something.
That complexity, or that contradiction, there is a moment in the episode we're going to talk about today where you will feel validated, JB.
Excellent.
Great. Oh, and then my other topic was, do I like Malcolm now? Because despite all of this, this was the first time I kind of really started to he did not bother me in this episode. I liked him much better than Archer. I thought his story about his uncle was really good. I do feel like whenever he talks about his family and his kind of strained relationship with his family, it feels so relatable and vulnerable. I really liked all of that. And frankly, he was 100% right that Archer should have sacrificed him to save the rest of the ship.
Archer shouldn't have been out there.
No, Archer should not have been out there.
Well, yeah, he shouldn't have gone out in the first place. But he was also just being irresponsible and negligent to put the entire ship at risk to save Malcolm, especially because the way he ended up saving him is totally infeasible and should not have worked. They both should have died. So it really, like, just let him murder himself, like putting over 80 people at risk. At that, like, when it got to the end where it was like the Romulans are like, we are about to destroy your ship, that should have been it.
So what you're saying, Jamie, is you feel that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one.
I know that reference. I have seen that movie.
Which might be the first time this idea has ever been expressed. T'Pol is furiously writing this down in her notebook. Question mark?
I think I might be onto something here.
Thank you for your... Oh, sorry, do you have more?
Oh, do I have more? I have a whole bunch of stray observations. One, T'Pol and Hoshi had rolly chairs on the bridge. Like, their chairs had wheels.
Really?
Which felt
Terrible
very
idea.
dangerous for the bridge.
I really want to see a scene where the Enterprise gets hit and they just go flying across the screen.
So because they did get hit, and Hoshi flew out of her chair, but I really wanted the chair to go flying.
Yeah.
Also, where did all of Phlox's medical assistants come from? Because we established in 2 Days and 2 Nights that he does not have any medical assistants. So,
I don't know.
But all of a sudden this episode, there were so many medical assistants.
I assume some of those were just like healthy people carrying the wounded down
That's
to...
what I figured too.
That's what I thought it was. But it definitely seemed like that one
maybe.
guy was a medical assistant.
It would be smart for him to have medical assistants. Like, there's no nurses on this
Maybe
whole
they
ship.
decided to do that.
Also, just shout out to the joystick.
Oh, God.
The joystick. Like, coming out of the thing. I just loved the joystick. And Hoshi's bruises looked so strange. Did you guys notice that?
No.
I did not know.
Makeup on these bruises, the bruise on her forehead was perfectly round, like a perfect circle. And then it had little raised sections that looked like little worms. I was like, I've never seen a wound that looks like that. It was so strange.
Yeah, no, I did not notice that.
I know that Maria pointed out that they could have just used a transporter. I wish they had just addressed this. Like, they could have just had a straight piece of dialogue that's like, can we try the transporter? And they'd be like, we can't because of the magnetic thing.
Right,
through
just
it.
one
like,
line.
just say something. Because the whole time I'm just like, just use the transporter. Like, you can solve this whole thing with a transporter. And my last stray observation was my favorite part of the whole episode was when Archer was holding his tablet when he's like out on the hull, and then he like lets go of it and it just goes flying away.
There are zero tethers in any of this. None of their equipment is tethered down. Nothing. Like, what are you doing? Of course that thing's just going to go into space.
And other than talking about the Romulans, which I know we'll get to, that was all of my comment.
Okay.
Yeah,
So, Erica, I believe you rewatched this episode before we get into your mission-specific protocols. Did you have some general thoughts on the episode Minefield?
So I thought the opening conversation with Archer and Malcolm was just hilariously awful. If Archer actually wanted to get to know Malcolm, he could have asked him what he wanted for breakfast instead of saying, I didn't know what you wanted for breakfast, so I just ordered for you.
It's a great point.
And then instead of saying, so I heard England is in the World Cup, he could have asked Malcolm a question. It seems like his motivations for inviting him to breakfast wasn't actually to get to know him.
Yep.
You guys have already mentioned some of the other things that I was going to bring up. The only other thing I had was going along with what Jamie said about those metal things that attach to the hull. First of all, why? Why? I don't even understand why they're there. But also, if Malcolm was being careful, he would have known that another one could possibly come out and have not been in the way of where it might come out.
Yeah, and he knew everything else about that bomb. Like, he had such specific knowledge of everything that needed to get done, but didn't notice that. It's so strange.
Yeah, my feeling was it seemed like they might have like scanned it because he had the tablet that was like when Archer had the tablet, you could kind of see it was like showing the schematic. Yeah. So yeah, if he had scanned it, he should have known there were those little parts and stayed out of the way of them.
Yeah, he said that only 2 of them have latched on, which meant he knew there were more. And so if he is in like a bomb situation, you want to be careful. You want to not get hurt. And so I just thought that was kind of silly.
Yep.
Okay, now let's get into the mission protocols here. Erica, I believe you were brought on board because you have some enlightening information about Romulans to share with us.
I think you mean Romulans.
Romulans? Why is she only getting the names of the races we know wrong?
Yeah, Erica, I have some. So here are my questions.
Jamie has Romulan questions.
Let me start by saying that I am not an expert on Romulans. I have just watched all of Star Trek a lot.
You don't have a PhD in Romulans? In Romulan anthropology?
So I feel like I know a lot about Star Trek, but I also have ADHD, so I have a very interesting memory where some things I remember perfectly and other things no matter how many times you tell me, I'm not going to remember. But I'm excited to hear what your questions are and see if I can help you out.
Okay. I know that you weren't here, but when we talked last week, Bill did tell us about the TOS episode where the Romulans were introduced. And first of all, I want to say, I was telling my partner about it when we finished. I was like, oh, Bill said, in TOS, when the Romulans were first introduced, you don't see them. So they do see them, I guess, and then are very surprised that they look just like Vulcans. So previous to that, we didn't know that Romulans looked just like Vulcans. And my partner looked at me and goes, "Yeah, I know. We watched that episode together." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Because I have only seen a total of 9 TOS episodes. I've seen the one where they go back in time and meet the nurse.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first of any Star Trek I ever saw. And then I watched the first 6 episodes of TOS, the pilot through Mud's Women.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then when I was watching DS9, I went back and watched the Tribbles episode
Yep.
of TOS before watching the DS9 one.
Mhm.
And then when watching Strange New Worlds, Maria told me to go watch the Submarine in Space episode before this, I want to say season 2 finale
Oh,
episode,
yeah, I vaguely
because it was
remember that.
related.
Mhm.
And that is the
That's
episode that
the-
Phil was telling us
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
They recreate part of
Are
it.
you talking about the Balance of Terror?
Mhm.
Balance of Terror, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love how Strange New Worlds did a tribute to that
Yeah.
episode. If you look on YouTube, there's side by sides of the 2 episodes, the Balance of Terror and then the Strange New Worlds one. And even the camera movements are the same.
Cool.
The positions that people are standing are the same. It's almost exactly the same in certain parts, just with different characters, since that's
Yeah.
what they changed.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Maria and Steven had told me to watch that TOS episode before watching that finale. So we watched them back to back
Good choice.
first time.
Nice.
So, but then I have to say, I don't even remember Romulans being in that episode. It's not what I remember about that episode. But
Did you think they were just fighting evil Vulcans?
I can't remember who they were fighting. Just the
Right.
exciting stuff. I
Yeah.
honestly don't really remember. I remember it ended and I was like, that was so good. I don't remember anything about it. But was it only the humans that didn't know that Romulans looked like them, or the Vulcans also did not know that Romulans?
Nobody knew what they explained.
Nobody knew.
and-
Yeah, I mean, Spock looked surprised, which, that's an emotion that
Yeah.
Spock was showing. So he definitely didn't seem to know that they looked like Vulcans.
Yeah, my recollection of Balance of Terror is that the crewmen, or the troublesome crewmen, people he had loved, had been destroyed by the Romulans, and there had been a previous war with the Romulans where there had never been any visual contact, and the only thing that they knew about them was they paint their ships like birds of prey.
But was that after this episode? Because at this point in the timeline, clearly Vulcans know who Romulans are, but are they at war with them?
So, as far as I know, there was never a war between the Romulans and Vulcans, but there was generations of mistrust. I think that during Minefield, T'Pol had heard of Romulans, but she didn't know that they were
Yeah.
an offshoot of the Vulcans yet.
Yeah, so that was going to be my other question, because it does seem like Vulcans and Romulans clearly share a common ancestor. But did the Romulans originally come from the same homeworld as the Vulcans?
Yes, so when Surak, the philosopher, he led the Vulcan people into an awakening of logic and reformed their whole culture. And there were some dissidents. It was around the 4th century Earth time. And those dissidents, they left Vulcan because they were just not happy with the changes being made. And so they went off on their own to start their own planet. And they went to Romulus and Remus and evolved separately from there.
And then the Vulcans just forgot all about them. Like, stop.
Yeah, did they forget about them?
Well, they just stopped paying attention. They were like, okay, y'all are gone. We're doing our own thing. And then these Romulans showed up and they didn't put 2 and 2 together that it was the same people.
Yeah, I was going to say, the Vulcans may not have forgotten that this happened, but it may be that the Romulans came up with the name Romulan after.
Yes.
And so they just didn't connect that it's the same group.
That is my understanding.
Because I was just confused about, I was like, if they share this history, how can they not know about them? I was confused, but
Yeah.
that makes it make way more sense. That it wasn't like it was just a mistake, like the Romulans specifically broke off of the Vulcans.
Have you guys seen, or are you familiar with the episodes Unification 1 and 2 from The Next Generation, where Spock goes to Romulus?
Yes.
Yes.
I love that episode for so many reasons, or those 2 episodes. One thing that stands out in my mind is these toys. They're these like little triangular toys that Romulan has that he grew up with, which are Vulcan language toys. So the Romulans have been passing down Vulcan heritage, not all of them, but the ones who are still interested in reuniting with Vulcans, they pass these things down to through the generations. And there's a whole underground movement of people who want to reunify.
Did you say it was 4,000 BC Earth time?
4th century, so about
4th century.
370 AD.
Okay.
Earth time is when the split happened.
So I always thought that Vulcans and Romulans looked alike because they had a common ancestor, but they were still separate species. But actually, that confirms they are not separate species.
Correct.
They are separate peoples.
Right.
But they are actually the same species. Like Romulans are technically Vulcan.
Yeah.
If Vulcan is like the equivalent of like human, then they're the same.
Pretty much. But the reason why the Romulans look a little different with the head bumps, supposedly, is that over those thousands of years, they evolved differently. So they may technically be a different species, but yeah, they all came from being Vulcans.
Yeah. I mean, we'd have to ask Celix if we ever have them back, but just because like that doesn't feel like enough time to become a different species, but I believe it would be enough time. It's way more than enough time for like small changes, like changes to the way they look. So interesting. I think that's all my questions. I don't know if you guys have.
Excellent. Erica, thank you so much for helping us out with this episode. Do you have a recommendation?
I do. I have 2, if that's okay.
Please.
They're both Star Trek related, because I figure if you're listening to this podcast,
a little show called Star Trek you might want to check out.
If you're listening to this, you probably like Star Trek. So my first one is The Orville.
Yeah, I love it.
It is Seth MacFarlane's love letter to Star Trek. He made Star Trek fan fiction films, which you can find on YouTube, when he was a teenager.
Excellent.
And he also appears as an extra in Enterprise somewhere. You're going to have to keep your eyes peeled for him, because I'm not telling you when or where.
Nice.
And he teamed up with Brannon Braga to co-produce the 2014 series Cosmos.
Oh
wow.
So he obviously is very into this kind of stuff. So he made a show called The Orville, which is like a modern Next Generation. And it's actually very good.
So good.
Yeah, the first season is more humorous, because I think that's how he got the show, because they're like, oh, you're Seth MacFarlane, you're Mr. Funny Guy, so make us a funny Star Trek show. And after the first season, he got to make the show that he wanted to make, which was more plot driven and more serialized, and it ends up being really good. There's still humor sprinkled in there, but it's such a great show. I love it so much.
Yeah.
And then my other recommendation is a book called A Stitch in Time. It is Andrew Robinson, the actor who plays Garrick on Deep Space Nine. He wrote and does the audio voice storytelling of the book. And it's a backstory and insight into Garrick and his character and what he's been through and where he comes from. And that's also really good. And I just love listening to Andrew Robinson's voice tell the story.
That's awesome.
I was half hoping you were going to say it's a book about sewing patterns and how to make the fabulous outfits that you see in his...
It's great. It talks about the Obsidian Order and his childhood, and it's really good.
Very cool.
I highly recommend it.
Thank you very much for your recommendation. And that's our second contact episode. Thanks for listening. Next episode, Maria will be covering Dead Stop, which gives me a lot of pause that this show is somehow going to go slower. Erica, before you go, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
I just made a social media account last night because I knew I was coming on here, and I decided that I should start a Star Trek social media. So you can find me on Blue Sky at Vulcan Science.
Excellent.
Following you right now.
Thanks again for being on with us, Erica. Special thanks to K.O. Myers at Particulate Media for sound assistance, to our friend David for our beautiful cover art, and to John Stephen King for being the voice of our computer. If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on your podcast app of choice, and tell your friends about it. We really appreciate it. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook as Enterprise Splaining, and on Blue Sky as @Enterprise Splain. You can also email us any questions, comments, and concerns such as, why didn't that thing have spikes on it? To enterprisesplaining@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Dead Stop.
For over 200 episodes, the 42 Cast has brought you interviews, topics, and reviews that are unequaled anywhere on the internet. And that's not going to change. That's right, if you want to listen to a bunch of geeks talk about a random geeky topic and have a lot of fun doing so, then the 42 Cast is the show for you. It's your ultimate answer to fandom, geekiness, and everything. You can only find all this awesome as part of the ESO network.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.